Well, good evening and welcome to Kopernik Observatory. My name is Drew Desker. I'm the director here at Kopernik, and great to have you join us on a not such a great observing night, but we still have an opportunity to learn, which is really what we're all about here. So Kopernik Observatory has been around for over 50 years. We are a public observatory and an informal STEM education facility, and I always like to do a very quick survey. Who's here for the first time? Or not for since your fourth grade field trip? All right, okay, all the people on that side. All right, and anybody here members? All right, a good portion of the rest of you, good. I always like to point out that Kopernik belongs to what's called the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers. And it's a consortium of over, I just learned today, it's 369 other science centers that will honor each other's memberships. So your Kopernik membership here will get you into the Robertson Museum down in Binghamton, or the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning. You can go down to the Franklin Institute in Philly, or the Intrepid in New York City. So if you like this kind of place, getting a Kopernik membership is valuable, because actually a few years ago, my daughter and I went down to the Franklin Institute, and had we paid street price, we would have basically, it would have been more than an entire year's family membership here. So a little PSA on that. Anyway, up here on the screen is our website. We always keep that up to date with what's going on. So we will always feature what our the next upcoming program is, which tonight's The Pursuit of Happiness, Science and Religion. But we also promote other things we got going on. We do a number of school programs throughout the year, but during the summer camp we have a very extensive summer camp program for students literally that are just going into second grade all the way through high school. And you can, if you come up here and go to summer camps, you can learn more about any of those camps, some of which have sold out already, but we still have openings in many of them. And these are week-long day camps that we've been doing. This will be our 34th year of these camps. Another thing we have going on is fairly soon is Rocket Fest. And Rocket Fest is a time where families or just individuals will build those Estes rockets, and then we'll come up here and we launch them. In this case, it'll be on May 30th. Last year, we launched 154 rockets over that period of time. It's a lot of fun, especially when you see the kids, actually get to hit the button that sends it up high. And so, if you know somebody that think that might be something they'd like to try, definitely go to our website and you can learn about that and register for a launch window. One of the things that I really enjoy are these Friday night programs. It's an opportunity for us to really dig into lifelong learning. Not everything we do is always about astronomy, and this evening's program is an example of that. But it's really an opportunity for us to just continue our education, and we're just so very fortunate to have a number of just outstanding presenters that have come up here. We have this world-class university that we were able to draw from, but also we've even had people zoom in from various locations. A few months ago, we had a mission controller from NASA talk about the work that he does as a mission controller, dealing with mostly the crewed missions, and actually he was as in CREW as opposed to CRUED missions. Anyway, but he was saying he emailed me that do you recall seeing those great images from the Artemis mission of the moon and looking at? Well, he was the one that was actually downloading those images from the capsule, and everybody was all just gathered around his workstation waiting for them to come in. But again, every Friday night we do a public program. You can find more about what's coming up. So if you go to experiences, you go down to public programs, and so you'll see what's coming up next. Next week we actually have a program. There's a group of students from Binghamton University that have their own rocketry club, and they are working on sending a rocket up to the Cayman line, basically the edge of space. We have a fantastic presenter, Peter Klimas, who's a high school physics teacher and just an extraordinary educator. And then we'll be even doing some work with VR. And so if you've never done VR, this is definitely the one to come check out, because we actually have a classroom set of VR headsets that you'll be able to check out, prior to that program. So our website really does offer all the information you need. But again, to get back to our Friday night programs, we're just very fortunate to have Dr. Tom O'Brien, who actually is on our board of directors, recently retired from Binghamton University in the education department. And this is actually the fourth talk in his series of science and religion. And so, Dr. O'Brien, if you would, we can adjust it. Yep. And so, make me happy.
Okay, that's better. So my name is Tom O'Brien. I'm very happy you're here. I had a lot of fun putting this together, but this talk, as I'll point out shortly, is a rather unique one. Any other talk I've ever given, I could say I'm an expert on. I can't say that I'm an expert on happiness. So bear with me on that. I had fun putting it together, and hopefully you'll have fun one or more points during the presentation. So let's dive in. So first of all, a disclaimer. I was known on campus for wearing lots of T-shirts. I just have one other to show you now. Don't. What? Don't trust me if I'm the doctor. I spent 48 years of my life being initially a high school, middle school science teacher, taught some math. Spent 5 years as a grad student, but mainly I was doing national curriculum and professional development work for the American Chemical Society. Then I spent the last 38 years at BU. None of that qualifies me to be an expert in happiness. The connection I have on happiness, I am a lifelong learner. And there's tons of research that shows that you will live longer and be much happier if you're a lifelong learner. The other main point of the whole talk, so we'll put the whole talk in the first 5 minutes, and then if we run out of time, we'll still be fine, is that pursuit of happiness is about relationships. Human beings are a highly social species. And tons of research, and we'll be touching on some of the scientific research that pointed out, if you had to say one thing about being happy, develop relationships. And it's not the number that you have, it's the quality of relationships. And it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be siblings, it could be, and so I wear multiple hats. My mother is soon to be 98 years old. Wow. Very nice. And still lives alone. Alone, she has support. I have 5 siblings, so I'm a brother to 5 siblings. Mom, of the many attributes, is she has a great laugh. And she smiles a lot, and when you're around Mom, you have to laugh. Sometimes at what she's doing, you play cards with her. Gotta watch her with the rules. I'm also a husband to just one wife, and one is good, if you have a good wife. That's what any happiness I have, it's obviously due to my wife Annette, who's keeping time, and she's giving me numbers here. If I'm doing poorly, she'll say, that's 50 minutes, you should stop, when it's only 10. I'm also a friend and concerned citizen, and a fellow crew member on this thing called Spaceship Earth. We are relational actually not just all the humans on this planet, we are genetically tied to every living organism on this planet. We share genes with the simplest of bacteria. We'll touch on that in a moment. So what are we going to talk about? With this whole series, what I'd like to do is to, what I'd like to do is cover like 3,500 years of thought in 60 minutes. So I'm going to cheat in a couple ways. One is I'm going to have way too many slides, and some of them I'm going to skip over. But the cool thing about the Friday night live programs, I listen to truckloads of webinars, and I do them almost all asynchronously. The advantage, I can speed it up. You can typically speed it up to as many as 3. 3 is too fast for almost anybody. 1.5 or 2 is good for most speakers. You can stop it and take screenshots. So in this presentation, I'm going to recommend about a dozen books and about a dozen YouTube talks, TED Talks. You can stop it and take a screenshot and have that. That's really cool. For the people that are online, you have that advantage, and anyone here, it'll be posted within like a day or so. So what I'd like to do, though, is to sort of summarize in the first 6 or 7 slides here the whole talk. And again, then we'll get down into all kinds of trees. But we want to cover the forest. So one of the big ideas of the forest for the trees is that what we call science, historically, until the relatively modern era, was called natural philosophy. So it was actually a subset of philosophy. So at the time our nation was born, the term scientist didn't even exist. The term scientist didn't come until the 1840s by a person who happened to be an Anglican priest who also was a top-notch scientist. In the history of science, so the other talks, one of them, the first one covers the history. There was a large correlation between religious people, partly because they had leisure and they were middle class. So a lot of research was done by people, and all the universities were founded initially by the Catholic Church, and then later by Oxford became non-Catholic when the Anglicans broke from the church. But so natural philosophy was part of philosophy, and religion, again, was tied into that. All the way back to the ancient Greeks, the notion of the logos, which is used a lot in the Bible. The logos is the logic of the universe. And minimally, the smart Greeks, and we'll be talking about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics, typically didn't believe in the pantheon of gods. They very commonly used the word God. Now, their conception wasn't a personal Christian God, but so the main point of Consilience is that large areas of human understanding, and the more we specialize, the more we find that things are interconnected. And truth supports truth in multiple disciplines. So that's a major theme through this series. Consilience is a term that the same Anglican priest coined the term. He coined positive, all kinds of terms we use in science were coined by this scientist, Anglican priest. The philosophy side, today we're going to look at mainly ethics and a little bit of political philosophy. The question of what is happy then raises the question, well, what is unhappiness? And in our culture right now, political philosophy and politics is making a whole lot of people really, really unhappy. And we'll dissect that a little bit. So I like to use analogies. There's an ancient Hindu parable called The Six Blind Men and the Elephant. It was converted into a poem in 1872, like everything you can find it on the internet, the whole poem. I have part of it here. But these visuals, if I was teaching my students how to give PowerPoint talks, I'd say that's way too many words. These are for, if you're interested, you can follow up online and take screenshots and find them. But the basic story is that 6 blind men went to see an elephant, and they're each being blind, they're examining it tactually. So they're touching different parts. And you can imagine what this one describes, what he is seeing, what this one here is experiencing. Each one is experiencing something very different. And they all have a partial truth. None of them have the whole truth. And that's a really good metaphor for several things. One is our different disciplines are separate subject matters that we teach in schools like they're all silos, that there's English and history and all these things are separate. That is a total lie and a fabrication. It's a useful lie if we tell students it's a simplification. So to study chemistry and then biology, they're simplifying it. But you can't look at anything and say, well, that's just chemistry. There's no physics there. And nothing is alive can be alive without chemistry and physics. So there's huge overlap between these disciplines. There's also a whole lot of overlap when it comes to this pursuit of happiness. So we're going to be looking at philosophy, a little bit of history, a little bit of evolutionary social biology. And a key question is happiness a do-it-yourself thing? Can you be happy all by yourself? Or, as the Beatles song said, I get by with a little help from my friends. Is friendship a key part of happiness? Or I think it was Barbra Streisand in one of her movies or plays. People who need people are the luckiest people. So a major theme is going to be the answer is yes. Happiness is not a do-it-yourself function. You have a lot of influence, but your interactions with other people matter. So let's just do a little bit of science while we're here. Artemis. Has anyone did anyone hear or watch their day one delayed press conference? It's worth checking out. Because in that press conference, all these words here, the astronauts speaking presumably off the cuff, they didn't appear overly prepared, kept mentioning crew, team, love, gratitude, joy, mirror reflecting you. The one guy kept saying the joy train. And they were talking about how they're connected to all, 10,000 people or more have worked on this project. Their team is 10,000 people or more. And it crosses international lines. These are all words, humility. They were just hugging each other. And what they were reflecting is the best of human beings. And that's really that mission. If you travel 250,000 miles and you think you can do that by yourself, you're an idiot. And if you think it's a team of 4 people, no, it's like over 10,000 people. In fact, they're standing on the shoulders of giants of all the former missions. This is an amazing feat. Little bit of science real quick. So what they showed on the TV repeatedly, that's going to be the Earth. And this is the size of the moon. And most pictures you see have that maybe 50% off this ratio here. But what they're showing in this picture here, which they kept showing on the news, it looks like it's maybe 2 Earth diameters away. So maybe the moon is like here. Oh, thank you. Oh, there we go. There's the Earth. And so what they're showing is the moon was like about here. Raise your hand when you think I'm in the right place. Raise your hand and keep your hands raised. Raise them high. You don't do science without making mistakes. And who knows, these could be the right answers and the rest of you are wrong. So raise your hand as we go. Yeah, you have to turn around and look at me here. The moon is about 30 Earth diameters away. So a picture can be worth 1,000 lies, as it turns out. And that grossly misrepresents a couple things. One is the teamwork that it takes, because remember, everything's moving. The moon is moving around the sun, and they're moving around the Earth, and they're in sync in that with the so-called dark side. It's just dark because we never see that side, unless you go 250,000 miles away and go to the far side of the moon. These things are doing this. They're both rotating their axis, and they're both going around the sun, which is 93 million miles away. So again, think how grossly we misrepresented the teamwork that needed to get that far. And it turns out this here is a bromance, if you will. If the moon wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. If the Earth wasn't here, the moon wouldn't be here. So many things about our life cycles and everything are tied to the tides and everything. So this is a relationship, if you will. Neither of those exist as separate entities. And the fact that we can go 250,000 miles away from our home and come back, and what you speak about is love and friendships and relationships and teams and crews, why don't we do that more here? And I don't mean just at the political level. I mean in our own families. So happiness is about relationship. Okay. Second major theme is that learning which is a key part of happiness, is a function of the interaction between the affective domain, and this actually was published in the year 1956 by a guy called Benjamin Bloom, and spent his life researching. The affective domain, think your feelings, your emotions, your attitudes. The behavioral domain, what we physically do, and the cognitive domain. And that intersection of those happens both within your brain. You've got neurons talking to neurons, and we'll spend a minute talking about that. And we are very much interacting right now. I can't directly do brain surgery on you, but to the extent you're going to learn anything tonight, it's that you do brain surgery on yourself. By what you choose to pay attention to, what you choose to do with the information, you are doing brain surgery on yourself to the day you die. My mother at 97, soon to be 98, is still learning. She'll probably always cheat at solitaire. She thinks that's okay. But otherwise, she's always learning. She's still sewing. She's made like 400 prayer blankets and stuff, and blankets for kids in orphanages and stuff. So that interaction between people is a key part of what happiness is about. Happiness is not a solo operation. Okay. The brain. So how do we learn? If learning is a key part of happiness and happiness is a key part of learning, what's the connection? There's a couple things. One, when I was born in 1956, this would have been considered not true. We didn't believe that the brain could grow new neurons. You're born with more than you'll ever have, and that's true, and then you lose them progressively as your brain prunes back, and we thought that was the end of the story. But it turns out there's several sections of the brain, including this portion of your brain that deals with memories and balance, can grow new neurons. And those are things older people tend to have problems with. We actually have means of making that not so bad. The ways that we normally think about learning is that literally two neurons, the expression, if they fire together, they wire together. They literally, you are doing brain surgery right now. So your neurons can make new connections between maybe these disciplines that you've thought is separate, religion, science, and philosophy. Hopefully by the end of the talk you'll not see that. The other thing that can happen is you can strengthen the connections between two neurons. The more you use certain relationships, the more those relationships come quicker to you. So if you've ever learned a musical instrument or something, the more you practice, the reason why it gets easier because those neurons actually sync faster. And one of the ways it does it, it forms a better protective, insulating myelin sheath around the neurons. And so they can connect faster. So we can strengthen neurons, and of course we can lose neurons. And some things about happiness is we have to unlearn certain lessons you learned in life. All of us who are in families, parents, siblings, school teachers, etc., we learn some lessons that probably aren't the right lessons. And we need to unlearn that. Unfortunately, you can weaken certain synapses. So certain things that if you're with siblings or people, they always set you off. You can break those connections. You can't change their behavior, but you can change your reaction. So a major theme about learning and is the connection to happiness. I'm going to do one quick science demo here, just because I'm a science teacher and it's fun. And we'll see here. I bought this at the dollar store, and it's battery powered, so I'm not entirely sure what it's going to do, but let's see what that does. That's not the main effect. It's a dollar store, so maybe it'll do nothing. So I'm just going to put some soft drink in here. This was invented, carbonated water was invented by Joseph Priestley, who actually was a theologian, major scientist at the time of the American Revolution, and co-founder of the Unitarian Church, which we have here, Riverside Drive. That was co-founded by one of the top chemists in the world. So, well, that was supposed to be a light, I think, but that's not the main story. So I'm just dropping some raisins in here for a minute, and we're just going to let those there, and I'm going to keep talking, and we'll see if it does anything of any interest. Okay. So raisin questions. Anytime we see yellow highlights, the questions that we're going to spend a minute on. Second thing about neuroplasticity. So ways of being happier and keeping your brain alive and connected. Social interaction is the key. If you're getting elderly and you need hearing aids, get them. One of the major causes of dementia is not being able to hear, and our brain is wired to connect. If you cut off that connection, you can't hear, and you fake it till you make it, you won't. So hearing aids. Meditation and or prayer, depending on how you define those two things. And we have neurological evidence for this. Makes a difference. Not saying that proves there's a God or anything. People don't meditate, that don't necessarily believe in a God. But either of those two functions work. Positive emotions. Having fun. As little kids typically don't have to taught to have fun. They play. We don't do enough of that as adults. Learning in general, paying attention actually matters, and we don't teach that very well in school. Your diet actually matters, and for the most part, our American diet is really whacked out in terms of the evolution of what our body is designed to deal with. We eat way too much sugar. That was a scarce thing. We eat way too much fats, way too much meat. The current Make America Healthy movement, again, I won't go into, but don't. None of the top nutritionists and biochemists in our country recommend an upside-down pyramid. But we do know a lot about diet. We know a lot about exercise, movement. One of the biggest risks if you're old and you fall and you stop moving, your brain starts shutting down. So keep physically moving every day, and new experiences at any age. Keep learning. So those are all things that research shows makes a difference on learning and has a connection to happiness. One last thing on that. You've probably heard about the so-called growth mindset. Think about how these relate to being happy. To use challenges as opportunities. Not, oh damn, it's that again. What about challenges as positive opportunities? And we'll talk a lot about the Greek Stoic philosophers, and they viewed that the obstacle was the way. That's how we actually learned and got better at living and happier. Embrace constructive feedback. Think about how much unhappiness we have because we don't learn to give or receive feedback in a positive way. Focus on the process, not the end result. If you only focus on the end result, you'd probably never learn anything new. It took me several weeks to learn to play the guitar. One song, Take Me Home Country Roads, and I was playing it wrong. My wife, then my newly dating partner, corrected me. She's a musician. I'm not. Be inspired by other successes rather than define that you are threatened by other people's successes. Learn and grow from failures. Step out of your comfort zone. Believe that talent is ever improving. Those are all things that research shows will make you happier. There's a whole lot of research on this so-called growth mindset. TED Talks are wonderful. They're typically about 14 minutes long. And so the author of this extremely well-known book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, has a TED Talk. And if we think about your brain isn't fixed. It can grow. Not out of your skull. It's a metaphor, so it's not perfectly true. But think about as we go lower. I mean, if I'm blessed to live to be 98 years old, I hope I'm still learning at the end, because that's a whole lot of what makes life happy. I've just entered this new phase of life called retirement, and it just blows my mind that if I have 69, if I have another 30 years to live and learn, how cool is that? Okay. All right. Those are the highlights of the past talks and where we're going. So pursuit of happiness, that phrase is associated with Thomas Jefferson. He stole it from the philosopher John Locke, the British philosopher. It's interesting, at the founding of our nation, we have the Declaration of Independence, but it's always based on them collectively binding together. Whereas Ben Franklin said, we must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we will all hang separately. So the Declaration of Independence from England was a declaration of mutual interdependence among those 13 colonies, which were very, very different. Not just North versus South. They were very, very different in terms of their culture, but they bound together. And a key point that bound them together was they all were deep deep readers of the Stoic philosophers we're going to touch on. And many of the ideas, if you read the Stoic philosophers, like, oh, really? That's where they got that. So then the question is pursuit something that can be taught? Is happiness something that can be caught? And what's the scientific basis for this? So a really neat place for all kinds of both feel-good stuff, but really cool scientific research is a place at UC Berkeley called the Greater Good Science Center. The founder of that is somewhere on the agnostic to atheistic spectrum, but a brilliant, very loving, really interesting human being. He wrote a book called Awe, which we'll refer to later, The Science of Awe, which is cool. Okay, a lot of words. Main thing. Happiness, if we look at it simply as the pursuit of physical pleasure, and the Greeks, ancient Greeks talked a lot about this, and modern scientists talk a lot about it. We'll take a look at bacteria in a minute. But all living creatures seek pleasure in the sense of physical sensation that they like. And I'm using quotes because that bacteria don't think. But yet they still have things that they're attracted to and things that they're averse to, even though they're not conscious. In the case of conscious humans, we have possessions and private property. And one philosophy says that those who have the most at the end win. And tons of research shows that's not true. For the most part, people that win lotteries have their whole life screwed up and end very unhappy. Now, you might be the exception to that. So if you believe in lottery tickets. Power to achieve personal goals. We all want to achieve certain things, and that can make us happy, maybe. And then our prestige, our public position. So the ancient Greeks and modern scientists talk about the 4 Ps: physical pleasure, possessions, power to do stuff, and prestige. And as conscious human beings, we go for those things. Anybody notice anything unusual happening over here? I was hoping the light would light from the bottom, but it didn't. Anything unusual going on with the raisins? Can you see? So, raisin questions. Raisin questions. So, the science of that's very cool, but we don't need to go there. The other thing that humans do is we seek to avoid certain things, pain and suffering in particular. We even have a built-in biological negativity bias. Researchers have found it typically needs 3 to 5 positive things to counteract something negative for most people, unless they're very conscious in how they even define positive and negative. Because negative things, if that sound over there could be a saber-toothed lion, oh, it could be a friend. Yeah. What are you going to bet on? If it sort of sounds like a saber-tooth and it could kill you. Ancestors that believed, oh, it's always a friend. I'll go give it a hug. They're not here. Their descendants all died off. So we avoid things that threaten us. So bacteria. Bacteria have desires, if you will. Again, not conscious, but their desire is to find environments that allow them to reproduce. And the cool thing is, we are one of the best places. We have somewhere between as many as 10,000 species of bacteria living in us and on us. You think, oh my God, I'll go home and take a bath. No, most of those are good. Some of them are neutral. Few of them are bad. Your gut, all your digestion completely depends on good bacteria, which is why eating yogurt and fermented foods is good, because they support bacteria and they actually have bacteria in them. So they're symbiotic in the sense of it's a relationship. Bacteria are happy where they have good places to live. Your gut is a great place for good bacteria to live. When you take an antibiotic, they're generally non-specific, and they wipe out some of your good bacteria, so you get diarrhea. So you eat some yogurt or take some probiotics, and you're in good shape again. So bacteria seek out good environments to reproduce in, and certain environments, if it's too hot, if it's too cold, if it's too acidic, if it's too basic, they avoid those places. And different bacteria find their home in different places. You have more bacteria cells in and on your body than you have human cells, and that's what part of you're a whole ecology in and of yourself. Okay, us though, humans, Rolling Stones. I can't get no satisfaction. So the question is happiness primarily about immediately having and getting something, satisfaction? Is it about somehow holding on to satisfaction? Or is it actually a state of being that is somewhat independent of your circumstances? And what we're going to learn, what modern cognitive psychologists, particularly cognitive behavioral psychologists and Stoic philosophers talk about, it's really more about this. Which is not to say that it's not great, it's a good thing to have happy thoughts and have beautiful things to look at and all this. But mainly happiness is an internal job, and a large portion of it is internal, relating to other human beings. Okay. Equation. If it's science, there must be an equation. So satisfaction is what you have of those 4 P desires, the physical pleasure, the power, the prestige, and the possessions, relative to what you think you need. So if you want to have more satisfaction, if this equation, satisfaction equals what you have divided by what you think you need, there are 2 ways of being more satisfied. What are the 2 ways? So if we got more stuff, that would be the numerator on top would make that a bigger thing. So get more stuff. What's the other way you can have satisfaction or happiness? Need less. And in our culture, in America in particular, we just have never-ending needs that the TV and social media tell you, if you have one more thing, you'll be good. I'm always particularly amazed at the advertisement for females' cosmetics. They're flat out telling you you don't look good enough. But if you buy our product from the people who are telling you you don't look good enough, you'll be happy for a little while. And then we'll have a better product. Okay, philosophy quick. Happiness. Epicureanism took the notion, what I call grown-up hedonism. A bacteria is sort of hedonistic. It knows what it wants, it goes for what it wants, and it just reproduces like crazy if it has enough of what it wants. If it doesn't have enough of what it wants, it starts to die back. Ancient Greeks, though, figured out that happiness was an end in of itself for human beings. But their form of hedonism actually wasn't about just getting pleasure. They realized the big thing was to have less pain. And that many of the things that people sought after for pleasure, I'll just add another wife, actually in the long run gave them more pain. Or I'll just eat more, or I'll drink more. So the hedonism that the ancient Greeks, the Epicureanisms, followed was a hedonism that focused more on needing less of that equation. 10 Commandments. Let's look at them from the point of view of science. So a colleague at Binghamton, since retired, David Sloan Wilson, is one of the top evolutionary biologists in the country. And he wrote several books, but one was called Darwin's Cathedral. He's not theistic in his personal belief structure, but he wrote a book analyzing what is it that religion does that enables it to keep surviving, and not just surviving, but helping people survive. So we're not going to answer the bigger epistemological question of is there a God or not. But for people who believe it, if we look at the 10 Commandments, we have the first 3 that say you believe in this all-wise, all-wonderful, all-good God. And the word religion itself means binding. And so what it does in the history of humanity, we find the different religions created social solidarity. Now, there's an in-group. Unfortunately, if there's an in-group, there's always an out-group. But the ancient Jewish idea was there really was one God. So there wasn't like a Jewish God and then a Greek God. There was one God. Most of the commandments, though, deal with you shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. Well, think about if happiness depends on human interactions. If you have a society where people will kill each other, they commit adultery, they steal from each other, well, you're not going to have a society. So basically, the 10 Commandments are rules on how to live happily with other human beings. Again, from a purely scientific point of view. So I'll leave you at that. Interesting book on that. One of the things that when we teach evolution, we only tell half the story, and the half of the story that we tell is about competition, the dog-eat-dog world. That is true. It's only half the truth, though. From the smallest level, every cell in your body has somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 mitochondria, what gives me the energy to walk. Those were once free-living bacteria. They have their own DNA. All their DNA comes from your mother's egg cell. In every cell in your body, you have an ancient bacteria that reproduces on its own, has its own DNA, and that allows all the cells to work. Larger level, scientists have studied social insects. Scientists have studied humans, and in all cases, they find out that cooperation, both within species and across species, is a huge predictor of survival. In the case of humans in particular, there's a wonderful book called Survival of the Friendliest. This is straight science stuff, but literally, rather than survival of the fittest are the friendliest. Think about the implications back to the Artemis mission. Artemis, of course, was the Greek god of the moon. So the Artemis II mission back to the moon. Think about the implications of that for humanity. If we actually realize we're all on the same ship. It's called Spaceship Earth. When that visual came out when I was in middle school, I was like, blew my mind. That picture should be in every classroom. We are all evolutionarily related to every other human being. We're all one species. But we're evolutionarily related to a turnip, a tulip. There's nothing on this planet that you aren't connected to from an evolutionary point of view. Rather cool. I gave a whole talk on that. The Friday Night Live talks, all of them, the past recordings you can find online. And again, the cool thing, async, you can stop it, you can take screenshots, you can speed it up. So I recommend that. Another aspect of social evolutionary biology is what's called pro-social behavior. Fancy term, people helping people. Pro-social behavior. And helping people, we talk about reciprocal altruism. I help you, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. That's part of being human, but humans are at our best when we're just altruistic. And generally it cycles back to us. The founder of the whole TED Talk movement, Chris Anderson, gave a really cool talk called infectious generosity. Think of that term, infectious. Spreads out of control. What if it was infectious generosity rather than infectious war and warmongering? So we're a hyper-social species. If we combine good skill with goodwill, it's a two-way human healing power. When I have a doctor who's not only technically competent, but I get the sense he or she actually gives a hoot about me, I will heal faster. Or if inevitably I'm going to die happier if I'm surrounded by people. So here in our community, we have a wonderful place called Mercy House, which is a hospice home. And medicine at that point isn't going to help them live longer per se, but the hospice environment is going to help them live their life as happy as they can for as long as they can. So, last thing on that, pro-social behavior, really, really cool website. In our local environment here, and I assume nationwide, there are big bulletin boards, and sometimes they say life vest inside on them that promote pro-social behaviors. These talks, one day is a silent film, which is really, really cool. It's powerful with some nice music. The Science of Kindness is actually a short presentation on the science of kindness. The Great Dictator is a 1940 Charlie Chaplin film, which is very cool, and they have the monologue from that. Every American needs to listen to this. It will blow your mind. And of course, 1940, what was going on? World War II. This is a parody of Hitler, which is absolutely astonishing. Why it's not more common, I don't know. And there's TED Talks, so there's cool things there. What about religions? It turns out a lot of interesting research on the overlap of science and religion. The Awakened Brain is by came out a few years back by a clinical psychologist from a Jewish background who had strayed from her faith and sort of rediscovered it, but mainly it's a book about science. She identified 5 things that all religions had in common. If you ever watched The Office, the actor Dwight, I think was his name, on that, he's has a podcast and a book, 2 books called Soul Boom, is arguing that We need science, but we actually need a spiritual revolution, and spiritual doesn't have to be tied to any particular religion. He identified 10 things they have in common. The point of all that is that all of them are saying some very powerful, similar things about happiness being connecting to other human beings and getting outside of our own little ego, self-transcendence, and we'll talk about the science of that in a minute. Real quick here, the golden rule, every major religion has the golden rule. That's consilience. If all these religions that help people to survive in different cultures and different places on our planet are all saying the same thing, that's pretty powerful. And what they're saying is very much in opposition to evil. Think about global geopolitics and the pursuit of pleasure by some of our leaders, power, property, and prestige. That works against human happiness, an overemphasis on those relative to these things that religions have in common. And so rather than bringing out the good, which I hope you can see here, look at it again and see what else is hidden there. So religions throughout history have been used for both good and evil. So has science, so has politics, so has there's no group I could belong to that I could say, well, I like everything that they're about. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Good and evil is a pervasive thing in humans. Just want to pull out one quote here from the famous guitarist, African American, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. I'll repeat that. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. This organization is really cool. Actually, this is the group I misspoke a few minutes ago that has the billboards in our local environment. And what you see at the bottom of it is passiton.com. That's their website. Really cool, uplifting stuff. You can get daily, really powerful quotes. They have some podcasts, some videos. It's a really, really great site for promoting positivity. Think about personally in your life and as a nation, do we put, what's our status of our bank of trust and goodwill? Do we make regular deposits in the people that surround us? Do we invest in the people that surround us? Or are we underinvesting in the power of love and overinvesting in the love of power? So apparently our military arsenal has been reduced by 50%, and we now need trillions of dollars to fill in all the bombs and things. Okay, maybe there's alternatives. So what does science say? Science says that your happiness is a function of several things. One is genetics, and as much as 50% of your happiness is just, so some people just seem to always be happy. And it turns out there is genetic links. Some people have a more positive versus a more negative affect, not uncommon. And you can see it in families. Relatively constant, except little things that come along the way. Oh, I won the lottery. This goes up and down. But what science has found is that for the most part, there's sort of a set point that is connected to your genetics. Now, your circumstances matter, but only about 10% of the variation in people's final set point for happiness is connected with those external things that we think make a difference. The biggest thing that makes a difference, and there are like 5 books, everything that's underlined here, there's a book by that title. There's a ton of science research on what are called psychological interventions, or if you will, happiness hacks. And they include things like cognitive reframing, we'll spend a minute on that later, cognitive behavioral therapy connects to that, flow activities, forgiveness, goal commitment, make goals, make small victories, remember those, forgiveness, gratitude, the attitude of gratitude. We spent a lot of time with our children trying to teach that. Learned optimism, the power of positive thinking, meditation, mindful moments, physical activity, especially in nature. Walking is just the best. Research has shown that regular walking compares with any antidepressant or any anti-anxiety drug you ever take. Does as good or better. If you walk in nature, it's better. We were born, spent the first 300,000 years pretty much of our history in nature before agriculture and modern society came along. Getting out and looking at the stars when you can see them is absolutely crucial to that. Random acts of kindness, which aren't really random, they're intentional, social connections, religious and spiritual transcendence, and the science of awe. So at least half of those things. There's actually books by that title. That particular compilation was put together by this particular researcher in the book, The Howl of Happiness, A New Approach to Getting the Life You Want, and Myths of Happiness. But what we want to get to the point is where it's not just about hedonic ups and downs, but things that we can control. And that's where the Greeks had a lot to say. The downside of hedonism is this hedonic treadmill. Think of a mouse on a wheel. The sad thing, whether it's social media that you're addicted to or a drug you're addicted to, you have desire, you strive to get it, you enjoy it, but then you adapt, you need more, and it's a downward cycle. So that unhappiness is caused very commonly by these what are called negative positive feedback loops, where it drives you to want more, and getting more, you need more. And those kind of things generally are unhealthy. Also, what typically happens if you're addicted to anything is your future self and your future happiness doesn't count. Its future is discounted. Human beings live partly in the present, but also in the past and in the future. And if we discount our future self, we're going to do certain things that might make us happy in the very, very short term, but end our life prematurely, or give us diseases and things that we don't want to have. Okay. I'm going to skip over this just real quick. This question of why do bad things happen to good people has been with us forever. So just being good, which is what the Greeks talk a lot about, you're still going to encounter some unhappiness. The Greeks. So the Stoics. The Stoics all relate to Socrates as he wasn't a Stoic, but he's their hero. He's their patron saint, if you will. He was actually condemned to die by the Athenians for teaching people to think and to question whether there were a whole bunch of gods or if there really was a God that resided in each of us and there was one God. So he was forced to drink poison. He could have escaped. He did. So he's a martyr from the 300 BC era, 400 BC. He said great things. The secret of happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. He understood that equation. Contentment is natural wealth. Luxury is artificial poverty. He was a soldier. Philosophy wasn't something that was just an academic thing. Most of the early philosophers were soldiers, were leaders, etc. This group 3 here, Socrates beget Plato. This is intellectual son. Plato beget Aristotle. Aristotle beget all of Western philosophy. And a whole lot of the early Christian Catholic Church was linked to Aristotle's thought. One idea I want to, the notion of, and this has been pronounced, if you look online, 3 different ways, but I'm going to call it eudaimonia. And it's happiness that's a state of happiness based on virtuous living. So that is a Greek idea, the look for the good, the true, and the beautiful. That is the basis, ultimately, of science and political science, Stoic philosophy, Christian theology. Just another quote from Aristotle emphasizing that happiness depends on cultivating our character. That's something under our control and how we think. And it's great to have good circumstances, but your happiness shouldn't be tied to things you can't control. Stoicism, again, founded. This very rich merchant has a vessel filled with purple dye, which was the most expensive dye because it was used by the royals and it was rare to get. His sinks ships, he survives, he lost his whole fortune. And as he said, I made prosperous voyage when I suffered a shipwreck. He washed up on the shores of Athens, walked into a bookstore, and before then he had spoken to the Oracle at Delphi, and the Oracle at Delphi said, you'll find happiness when you learn to talk to dead people. He walks into a bookstore and picks up a book about Socrates. And the whole Stoic movement was founded. It's important to look at, well, what causes unhappiness? If happiness is a lot about character building and good living, unhappiness. So there's a lot of research on this that predates any current politicians, to make that clear. 3 things generate unhappiness, and it's part of a dark triad. One, if you're a narcissist. If it's all about I, me, mine, I'm the greatest. What was the boxers? Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. I'm the greatest. Not a good person, at least in the context of promoting happiness. Machiavellianism. You use people and you love things. You're manipulative. Psychopathy is that you have no empathy for other human beings. So a lot of research on that shows that you just generate ripples of negativity around you. And part of what's going on in our country now is a function of that. We've forgotten what we knew about happiness being relational. And I get more happier when I help other people get more happier. The ancient Greeks knew that. Other things that make us happy is ignoring problems. So we're really good, and I gave a whole talk here on climate change. This is proven science. It's been proven science that at the time of our founding fathers, Ben Franklin and Joseph Priestley, that theologian chemist that founded the Unitarian, wrote each other letters that basically, in the modern view, they're talking about global climate change. They were talking about, because Joseph Priestley figured out the cycle, we breathe out CO2, plants breathe it in, this wonderful cycle, all that was figured out, and we've ignored that. This is not new science. Most of what we needed to know, we knew by the late 1800s, the actual science of it, not new stuff. So ignoring problems is not a way to be happy. Ignorance is not bliss. Psychologist, the founder of the modern positive psychology movement, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have physiological needs like the bacteria. We have safety needs up because we have an extended childhood. Belonging and loving needs. It turns out belonging and loving needs, if you're a mammal, swamp everything else. Because the only way you get your physiological and safety needs met is if you have a mother or father or a family or a tribe that takes care of you. When are human beings independent? Nowadays, maybe when they hit college, out of college, who knows? But we're certainly not independent for the length of our childhood. Above that, there were esteem needs, cognitive needs, aesthetic needs. He ended this initially, this came out when World War II was going on. It was the start of the positive psychology movement. We definitely needed that at that time. He ended it with self-actualization. Later research that he did before he died in 1970, he said, no, we have to get beyond our self-actualization. We have to get to self-transcendence. Human beings are connected. We need to get outside of just our own head and our own egos and our own needs. So well-known research that there's been a whole field of positive psychology. Jesus Christ, wow, okay. Jesus Christ, I'm going to hop over this here. Again, just as a teacher, the Beatitudes are mind-blowing, but they're commonly misinterpreted. Just a couple things there. Poor in spirit is humility versus ego-driven. Meekness is the opposite of seeking those 4 Ps. The notion of hunger and thirst for holiness. The drama isn't just about you and what you want. So again, from a scientific point of view, there's a lot of research, and I've lined it up on the side, the science of flourishing, that suggests these are principles that could help make you happier. I'm going to skip over that. I have several slides on the Greek Stoic philosophers that align with what modern research says. So for instance, if man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. The importance of being vision and mission driven. The notion that difficulties strengthen the mind just as labor does the body. Seneca was a rich Roman leader, playwright, writer. His letters to Lucilius, there were 124 letters. And you read these and it's like mind-blowing. And it's all online free under the Gutenberg. So he had great things to say. He lived at the same time, if you note, that's the overlap with Christ's life, as a Greek slave who actually was a slave in the court of Nero. And Seneca, at one point, was a mentor to the young Nero. He failed miserably. Nero was one of the worst, most opposite of happiest philosopher kings that you could ever have. His main idea of overlap cognitive reframing, growth mindset, dichotomy control, just want to focus on dichotomy and control. He said the biggest source of unhappiness in life was the inability to identify what it is that you actually have control over and to do what you should responsibly do in that category. But in the other categories, and he actually put your body. Now, he was not opposed to, most of the Stoics were athletes. He had his leg broken by a sadistic leader, so he wasn't an athlete himself. But your body, within reason, you can exercise, stay in good physical shape, take care of yourself, and you can still die of cancer tomorrow. So he said, these things he said that you couldn't control. It wasn't that you had no influence on, but ultimately, the day you die may be written somewhere. And you can be otherwise completely healthy and have a heart attack. But within what you control, he said, we ought to give more attention to our impulses, our judgments, our desires, our aversions. And maybe we need to change those to be happier. So dichotomy of control is a big idea. This is a neat modern poem. I'll just read part of it. We cannot choose how many years we will live, but we can choose how much life those years will have. Pure Stoicism. It was written in 1980 anonymously. Marcus Aurelius was Plato's philosopher king. He wrote a little volume to himself, which we call Meditations. It is brilliant. It is brilliant. He had lots of great things to say there. Let's just pick one. To live happily is an inward power of the soul. Dwell on the beauty of life. Watch the stars and see yourself running with them. Nature, therapy, and awe aligns with that. So in each case, I've mapped modern research that aligns with his quotes. Read his book. It's short. You can find it online, Meditations. And it was written at a time there were plagues. Half of his 13 children were killed. His son was a no account, the one who took over, unfortunately, Comenius. There were wars, all of this stuff going on. So every bad circumstance that could happen to a human being happened to Marcus Aurelius. And he writes this brilliant thing of what it is to live a virtuous life. Virtuous life is about wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. That's exemplified by our founding fathers who made it to Mount Rushmore, and by the Wizard of Oz story. Very intentionally, the Wizard of Oz story featured these same four: courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. And those are the key features of these four presidents that they're known for. Modern research, and again, there's not time for this, but if you look up values in action, just Googled it. It's all straight science, but basically they've taken the four Greco-Roman so-called cardinal virtues the Stoics said were the key to happiness. That's the summations of what the Stoics said ahead. You'd be happy if you cultivate these characteristics. And they added, from a Christian perspective, it's faith, hope, and love, are the so-called theological virtues. In the science world, it's called humanity, and love is one subset of that, hope, and spirituality. All really cool research stuff that you can, there's self-assessments you can take. There's tons of research that's been going on this field of values and action. The flip side of that, and think about the modern world, we'll take Gandhi's 7 social sins, which Gandhi did not write. Knowledge without character, science without humanity, politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without morality, pleasure without conscience, and religion without sacrifice. And think of our world, your own life, and think of America and the world. How much unhappiness is being generated by those 7 social sins? They actually were written, I did a little more research, because I knew them as Gandhi's. I did a little more research, and they actually Gandhi credits an Anglican priest. Talked about those. So the flip side of the values and actions is disaster and massive unhappiness. We have more diseases, social anxiety diseases, loneliness, suicide, all of those are up, despite supposedly having phones that allow us to be 24/7 connected. We're not connected with people live, face to face. Visual only, what's the best of both worlds? If you can feel hedonic pleasure, you can enjoy a good strawberry shake, a good laugh. And your life has purpose. Short of that, if you just have the sweet life, you just eat goodies all the time. That will probably kill you prematurely if you just eat sugar all the time. Diabetes and overweight and heart disease from that are huge causes of unhappiness and early social life. So what the Greeks were about, this eudaimonia, was flourishing. And the best of both worlds. You can experience the simple pleasures that come your way, but not be over-attached to them, but be driven by happiness that's connected to being virtuous, is what the Greeks said. And again, modern science supports that. I'm going to skip over that. There's Wheel of Life balance surveys out there that you can take to see, well, there are areas of my life that you can over-invest in one thing and get unbalanced. Even if you're if you do good work and you ignore your family, you're unbalanced. There is an 80-plus year study, psychological study called The Good Life. The first cohort group was, we should wrap it up by thinking about the next 6 months. So Annette, let me know. The Good Life started with a Harvard study that John F. Kennedy was in when he was a Harvard student. And they studied a bunch of rich white boys. And then since then, the study has massively expanded. They have 3-4 generations and diversity, women, et cetera. Massive psychological testing. Now they do genetic testing. It's this really cool study. The most recent published work was called The Good Life by the current director, Dr. Robert Waldinger. He gave a really cool TED Talk about it, if you want a quick synopsis. But the synopsis in one word is relationships. That happiness is about the quality of relationships that we have. Not the quantity, but the quality of them. And that if you have good quality relationships, it turns out it has immense health benefits as well. So there's a correlation between you experience real happiness, what the ancient Greeks talked about, with living longer. There's another neat TED Talk. They've been studying the so-called blue zones, and these are people where portions of the world where people regularly live to over 100, and they're still walking around, and they're not in nursing homes. Really neat research on that by Dan Butner, How to Live to be 100. Thoreau is a famous, I'm just going to say one quote, "The mass of men and women lead lives of quiet desperation." I read Walden and The Duty of Civil Disobedience when I was a senior in high school. It had a huge impact on my life. He built this cool little home, and then he regularly went into the city because he realized relationships were so important. He just retreated here so he could write and stuff. Viktor Frankl, let's focus on him. Nazi survivor, all of his family died. Founded a field of positive psychology called logotherapy. One quote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Life is never unbearable by circumstances, but only by the lack of meaning and purpose." So there's a whole field of psychology of logotherapy. He actually survived till, was it 1977, and was still doing research. Again, think his whole family wiped out in the Holocaust, and experience and generate happiness for people. So brilliant example. The co-founder of utilitarianism, those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. Purpose-driven life. This was a guy who spoke at one of Obama's inaugural addresses. There is actually several countries where they regularly assess gross national happiness. Rather than GNP, they look at gross national happiness. So think about governments in our world and to what extent their budgets, their priorities, their policies and practices are about sustainable happiness. And is that something we want in politicians? Politicians who promote sustainable happiness. Again, the Greater Good Science Center, I've mentioned that before. Happiness Hack, how we see things matters. Take a look at the far right one. What do you see? Somebody tell me quickly. A woman? Can you give me more information about the woman? Give me something about age.
Age 25.
25. What does somebody else see? An old woman. So these classic ambiguous figures tell us that what we see, and again, the Greeks and modern cognitive psychologists say that what we see is partly a function of what we choose to see. And this case here is a classic example of a flip. So which face are you projecting? Are you projecting this face, or do you flip it and project the other face? So a cognitive hack is to how you perceive things. Another quote from Viktor Frankl, just talking about our responses are always a choice. If you haven't seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life, do so. It's a brilliant, if you had to summarize it all, is that people make a difference that ripples out and impacts lots of people, even if you're not famous. If you care about people, if you love people, you make a difference in other people's lives. Brilliant movie about that. Ripple effect, we don't need that. Flow, there's a book on, several books on flow, where you optimize your skill level with the challenge. So being happier, you should always be raising the game on trying to learn new things. And in a state of flow where you forget yourself in some really cool activity. And every human being has experienced it at some point. We can get better at experiencing that. This guy is all over the news. He's co-wrote a book with Oprah. He's a Harvard professor. Sum up again, this book and other books he's written and lots of talks and everything is that finding meaning, and a big part of finding meaning is relationships with others. So there's a lot of research on that. Poem, he drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. Maybe humans need to think about that. And there we have our planet. And so next steps is your personal plan. Can we actually have a personal plan for happiness? Yes, we can. Whatever stage of life we're on. And what I'll leave with then, Epictetus says, progress is not achieved by accident, by working on yourself daily. Abe Lincoln, most folks are as happy as they make their minds to be. There's a neat poem, but it's all, those are, and I have that just because it's online. Those are all really uplifting, powerful John Denver poems, prayers, and promises. These are poems, prayers, and promises, mainly poems that are cool, that will impact happiness. I have probably gone over it by at least 5 minutes, so I should shut up. If there are any questions, I will entertain them. Only 3 minutes, okay. My wife was keeping track for me. I should have speeded it up to 2.0 rather than 1.5. I could have done it. Okay, anything?
All right, if there are any questions, just raise your hands so that I can bring the mic so that people in the live stream can hear.
Our raisins are still dancing.
Yes, those dancing raisins are really quite something, although some of them are a little logy at the bottom there.
Yeah, that's a whole hour to stay happy is tough. Any questions or comments?
Tom, I really appreciate, Tom was originally supposed to do this talk at the end of the May, and we ended up having actually a group of students who are going to do a talk about their competition robot. They actually got to go to the national competition that's this weekend in Houston, which is why they're not here today. But Tom, very graciously, you must have had like a case of Red Bull over the last month.
Again, shouldn't have that many slides and shouldn't have that information on slides. But the cool thing is you can capture on screenshots. So anything that you wanted, any poems, any of the web links, you can capture. Because there really is a lot of great resources out there that will help you be happier and in turn help people around you be happier. And we need that.
He's used to giving 3-hour lectures.
My classes were all 3-hour long at the university. It's a good thing it gave it on May 1. If I'd had another month, maybe I would have had 120 slides. It would have gone nuts.
We do have a question here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's more question or more just comment, but having served about 50 years as a Methodist minister, of course I've preached a lot of sermons about a lot of different things. I am absolutely fascinated with the connections you draw scientifically about the connections we have with everything that is living, from bacteria to rhinoceroses or whatever.
Most of the biochemistry was figured out by bacteria long
Right.
before we were around.
Right. So anyway, along with that, the language of being happy, of the bacteria being happy, us being happy. I've always really believed that we do have a strong ability, if we choose to exercise it, to choose whether we will be happy or not. It's all, to a great extent, it's not that bad things don't happen. They do.
Yeah.
And I have had my life in my lifetime, as I'm sure everyone in this room has, enough bad experiences that if we wanted to sit around and have a debate about who had the worst thing happen, one of my things I like to say to people is that as a pastor, I used to sit and listen to people who needed somebody to talk to, pastoral counseling, and I would be sitting there oftentimes thinking, number one, I don't want to know this. Why do I have to hear this? But the other thing was that literally, I never, of course, said it out loud to anybody, but the thought would go through my mind that why is it that if we were in a competition for who's had the worst things happen, I could probably top anything you tell me that's happened to you, number one. But number two, for me, it's in religious terms, but the Chris Christopherson song, "Why Me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of all the good things?" And in my own life, very contented, very happy. I tell people about how I grew up, the hard work I had to do, how poor we were, all those kinds of things. And the reality is that it was good then, and I hear people say, well, no, it wasn't really that great. Well, it was. Maybe because I didn't know any better, but it was the way my life was. I was loved, I was cared for, all of those things that you've talked about. So I find a lot of stuff here that, if you will, is quite frankly preachable, whether as religion or as science or however you want to put it, but powerful positivity for human relationships and development. And I'm going to be watching the video of this, I'm sure, several times over the next few weeks.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, it's, I'll share it. Many years ago, my first wife suddenly passed away, and I remember sitting in my home thinking, I'll never laugh again. And people who know me know that that's really who I'm. Any opportunity to cut a joke, I will. But it was my. I was actually also a music director at my church. It was my music group that surrounded me. They made sure that I was not alone, that I had a relationship with people that ultimately lifted me up and ultimately introduced me to my wife, who's with me now. And it's extraordinary how much that connection makes an absolute difference in one's life. I mean, I was 36 when my wife died, and thinking, all right, my life is over. And but I also want to, but not to turn this on me, but I wanted to say thank you, Tom. I mean, when I'm watching TV, I prefer to watch something that I can stream. I can stop and go back and listen and go back over again. And you reminded me that we should be able to do that with any of our Kopernik live streams, or for that matter, any live stream that or any video that you see on there, to go back and really dig back into it. So thank you for reminding us of that. Anyway, any other questions? I don't know that we actually. Okay. Okay. Let me grab my. Okay, Laura. Here we go. It seems that we live in an age in which happiness is defined in very narcissistic and self-aggrandizing terms. These folks do not seem unhappy. On the contrary, can you speak to that?
Yeah. A lot of research shows that. Let's just take the issue of money. Are the billionaires necessarily happier? They're not. And the difference between, can they get short-term bursts of dopamine from beating up on people and being mean and cruel? If they're really messed up, they can. But in the long run, research, Hitler was not a happy person. Nero, who ultimately put to death philosophers and Christians, was not a happy person. In the short term, it seems like if we focus on felicity, having short-term burst of happiness, All kinds of perverse things can give short-term happiness. Pornography can give short-term bursts of happiness. There's tons of research shows that doesn't lead to happiness. So yeah, people are chasing the wrong things, even for their own slightly longer than short-term interest. Yeah, we have massive ignorance about what makes human beings happy, and again, the fact that it's a win-win. We're happiest when we're human beings at our best, caring for each other. And again, back to that Artemis thing. If you watch that day one later, they're hugging each other and using words like love and gratitude and the joy train. These are highly trained technical people. And they realize that you don't go 250,000 miles away and back just because you're smart. Nobody's smart enough. Nobody's good enough. So we are a hypersocial species.
All right. Well, thank you again, Tom. I really, again, appreciate the effort, and your talks are just always something to feast on, quite frankly. And again, we always have, especially for those people who are here for the first time, we have a rule that you can't leave here until you look through a telescope. Unfortunately, today it's just going to be look at a telescope. And so I'd be very happy to give you a tour of the scopes that we do have. And if you paid to get in, we will give you a card to come back on another day. Hopefully that is clear. So you get to enjoy another great presentation, but then get to look through our scopes here. Even people who live here in the area, when they come up here and it's a clear night, I've heard people over and over say, where did all these stars come from? And you just got to get away from the city lights. Again, when you look through our scope and you see, the storm on Jupiter, or you see the rings on Saturn, they rarely are there. And so we'd love to be able to share that with you. So I say here at 9:30 our time, we will, for those that are interested, I'll be happy to take you on a tour through the scopes. Also want to thank those watching on the live stream. We've now actually added, we've doubled our viewership from Oceania. Lindsay in Adelaide, Australia, who is with us every weekend, every Friday night. Well, for her, it's Saturday morning. But also, what is his name? Joseph William Polabello, who is with us from New Zealand, is watching us this evening. So, thanks again. Next week, again, we have our talk on the Binghamton Rocketry Group. For those that are in here, also, if you notice in the back, there is an extraordinary sort of astronomically oriented quilt that was done by the wife of one of my other board members, and we're actually raffling that quilt off. So if you have any interest in it, the raffle will actually be chosen at our Astrofest in September. Tickets are $5 a piece, or you can get 5 tickets for $20. As Tom had mentioned earlier, we do live stream. We've been doing it for the last 6 years. There's some great talks there, and anyway, we're looking forward to have you come back on another night, and have a good evening.